see the fan in the background. This is very
Oh yeah,
authentic. Yeah.
authentic summertime
You
in
know,
Turkey.
yeah, man. You know what? Actually, most people I know they don't need ACs, even though it's in the summer. It's always 31 degrees every single day, pretty much, right?
Yeah,
But with like air circulating, you don't really need an AC. But I don't have air circulating, so
yeah.
I bought an AC last year, and I've got a fan in this room because it doesn't quite reach this room. So that's that. But you know, I realized, just reflecting on my time in Turkey,
Hmm.
I realized that I love the greenery, bro. I love greenery. That's what
Yeah.
I love. So, alhamdulillah, when I look out my window, I see a lot of greenery. There's like a very big park. 10 minutes away, drive, there is a forest that I actually did a barbecue in it yesterday. And then you could just drive in many directions and there's a lot of greenery. So, I love that, bro. I never knew that I loved that because I was in UAE and I just didn't see much greenery.
Yeah.
But now that I'm here, I'm like, yes, if I was ever to live somewhere else, I want greenery for sure.
Hmm. I've not been to the UAE since 2008, and all I remember beige and grey. Is it still beige and grey?
Pretty much. I
Beige
mean, there
from the
are
sand, but
areas that are like full of parks and they like, they water it to death, so it's like really green. So there is
okay.
that, but obviously by default, no, it's not. And if you live in an area
Hmm.
with a lot of construction, then it's just going to be like a lot of these empty plots of land that's just dust, and then the buildings are like grey. So then it very much would be like that. But there are some areas, like I remember there was one very very fancy compound that I stayed in an Airbnb, and that was next level, bro. You go through the gate, and then it's just. I thought it was in England, bro. It's just greenery, trees, everything. But obviously,
Yeah.
it's all been, watered and designed to be like that. But either way, whether it's in UAE or wherever it is, I just realized, like, yeah, I really, really like that. I really appreciate that. Obviously, I think there's a reason that Jeddah has greenery. We love it. We love it.
You know what else is green?
What's green?
Tunis al-Khadra.
Okay. Why do they call it that? Is it Khadra? Like, really?
Oh, you never been to Tunis? Come on, bro. It's
I've never
Khadra.
been.
It's very green. Why do you think the Romans loved us so
What?
much? You know, they're like, oh,
Carthage. Hmm.
we're gonna have this place. It's very green, very fertile soil.
Yeah. Okay. Fertile soil, yes. But let me look at it on the map, okay? I'm looking at it on the map. Okay, I see it pokes out a little bit more than
It's
Algeria, actually.
the
So,
northmost point of
yeah,
Africa, so it's gonna have the
it
greenest because it's
is.
the closest to
Yeah,
Europe.
you're right. It's like on the same level as Sicily and stuff.
Exactly, it's
Um,
gonna be
yeah.
more green.
Okay.
Ah, we just have
Okay.
it
But
all,
that's
don't we?
only like that's like the north 20% of Tunisia. The rest
That's
is
the only
probably
20% I
desert,
care
right?
about. That's where I am. All right, the rest,
Okay.
they know.
Okay. Liberic. Yeah. Nice.
Liberic.
Nice. I have been thinking, bro, recently, I would say I want to say couple weeks. I've been thinking heavy about, the fact that I may not be in to Turkey for too much longer, you know.
Oh,
I've been thinking about that. And I've been
oh,
thinking about Algeria and stuff. So
oh. Finally,
that's all I'm
how
going to
many
say.
years? Like 7 or 8 years of
That's
mind
funny, man.
heist have seeped. I've indoctrinated you. I've brainwashed you. You've become with blood now. So,
You know what it is, bro? Uh, after let me do a quick calculation here. After about, let's just say, 20 something years of living as a guest in other people's country,
oh,
meaning non-citizen,
yeah,
I see the benefit of living somewhere where you are a citizen.
yeah.
So,
Especially when
we'll see.
especially when you like, as a quote unquote insurance policy for somewhere you want to retire. Let's say you can't work anymore. Where do you kind of settle? You can't, prov- would your business or your employment or your entrepreneurship survive without you? Unless you've built something that can, then
Oh,
it's hard to,
yeah.
it's hard to, like, for example, speaking to my sister yesterday about pension stuff. There's a discussion regarding private pensions and state pensions and stuff like that.
Mm,
And I always opt out of any private pensions I'm put into for work or whatever. But there was concerns. People always ask me when I do that. They're like, "Oh, but how are you going to survive in the future and this and that?" It's like, hey, I'm pensioning over here. If I get to the point where I can't work, then I'd like to think I'm not in this
mm,
country anymore. I'd rather retire
mm,
in Tunis with whatever we've got there, and that can get passed on
mm,
generation to generation, inshallah. Um,
mhm.
but more so, I think you're feeling a sense of North African pride as of late, aren't you? That's what it is. That's what set you off.
Go on. Transition.
I've been, I threw some segues already. Um, Transition. You know more about this than me, to be honest. I've been very busy this week, so why don't you give us the lowdown?
All I know about this is so there's a convoy called something, a Soumoud Convoy. And it started off in Sfax, I think, right? Is that correct?
Farkas. Yeah, probably. Yeah, maybe.
It's
That is in
Sfax with a
Tunisia.
calf.
I don't know how it's spelled, but I know it's Farkas is
I
how they
thought I
say
read
it.
it with a calf. Oh, they say
Sparkus.
it like with a calf. Okay.
Yeah.
So Sfax, it started over there in Tunisia as a convoy trying to get to Gaza, right? I don't know what exactly is the intention to deliver aid or just to like break through, or do you know? Okay, you don't know.
We can get into
Um,
that, but yeah,
so yeah. So there's a few. I think this is in line. Is it in coordination with this other thing called March to Gaza? Is that a
maybe
thing?
this is it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it could be. It
Because
could be.
I
Um,
think there's a March to Gaza thing, which is kind of all from all around the world, different people. But I think most of them were going to like fly into Egypt and then go make their way to the border. But this specific group, anyway, apparently there's thousands, right? I heard there were 7,000 people in Tunisia
hmm.
that met up, and that would be the Tunisians and the Algerians, because the Algerians went to Tunisia to like
Yeah, I
all
heard.
start from the same point.
Yeah, that must be why there's Moroccans as well then, because Moroccans, if the border was open, it might have started in Morocco. But I suppose
Yeah.
Moroccans, Tunisians, Algerians, and then Libyans would have joined as they came through Libya. And I
Yeah.
think more and more are
Yeah.
joining. You put a tracker on Telegram, didn't you? But I don't know
Yeah,
where they are
yeah,
at the moment. Last I checked, they're in Libya.
yeah. They're still in Libya. They just left. What's it called? They left Tripoli today, so they're making their way towards Haftar territory. For those that maybe are not up to date on Libya situation, obviously there was/is a civil war in Libya, and the western side of Libya is controlled by the internationally recognized government, like the legit kind of people, and the east side is controlled by the colonel or whatever, Haftar,
Tough, buddy.
who's the bad guy, to make it very
Whoa, whoa,
simple.
whoa.
So,
Okay.
so when they cross over into his territory, I wonder what we will see, because generally
Maybe fine.
Haftar, he aligns himself with the UAE, he aligns himself with Sisi, so they're kind of on the same team. So obviously in Egypt, they're not going to want it coming through to their side, and probably they would prefer it doesn't even get to their border, right? So for them to not have to deal with it. So yeah, so that'll be interesting. So that'll be like maybe the first main challenge of this convoy to get through Libya, get through that eastern side of Libya.
There was I mean, there are all sorts of like these groups, different politic groups, but someone mentioned in one that they heard that Egypt is allowing them through, not through into the cross the border into Gaza, but into Egypt, if you know what I mean. Um, yeah, that's probably the
One guy
smartest
told
play
me,
here.
an
Yeah,
Egyptian guy, he said, yeah, in Egypt they'll let them in so that they can rob all their stuff while they're in the Egyptian territory and then send them home.
in the Diwana. I mean,
Something
yeah.
like
So
that. I
look,
don't know.
from a ummatic, I'm going to use that word. I don't like that word, but I'm going to use it from an ummatic perspective.
Okay.
This is
Yeah.
a nice sentiment for nice sentiment is probably too weak a word. It's a nice effort
Mm.
for the people
Yeah.
of Gaza, and I've seen some videos from people in Gaza. I've seen only one video, to be fair.
Mm.
People in Gaza, celebrating the effort and feeling like they're not alone and feeling like they're being heard and feeling like they are part of a wider ummah. Uh, and I think it is also, it probably does more for the people who are going than it does for people in Gaza, in the sense that they feel like they're actually doing something after 2 years almost of feeling like they haven't done anything or they can't do anything. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
There's a lot of people in the
Yeah.
Muslim world who wish they could do more. Even ourselves, like, it used to be that when conflicts like this happen, we would pray for them and we would donate. And we would feel like, at least I've donated and I can see my donations have reached and they're eating and drinking. And a lot of the time I've donated to Gaza, I felt like, well, this feels a bit pointless only because I know that the aid I've tried to donate is only waiting on the border and
Mm.
going rotten. So what have I really
Yeah.
achieved in terms of trying to
Yeah.
alleviate this? And if like 1% of aid has gone in, does my loaf of bread go in? Does the hundreds of pounds we've spent go in? Like, so there's that.
Yeah.
There's that question. Um, but what, yeah, on
And
that point,
and
just on
probably
that
a lot of people have
aspect, what do you
stopped
think?
donating because of that.
Mm,
Maybe they're not 100% sure that their stuff is not going in or whatever, but generally they just hear that nothing's going in, and therefore they're just like, well, I'm not going to donate. Therefore, if I'm going to donate money, I might donate to another country just because,
mm.
yeah, I guess it's not going to do anything, right? So
It depends who you
I
donate
guess
to as
that would
well. Like,
happen.
I've only donated to
Mm.
the World Food Program when it comes to Gaza because I it's not that I don't like any other charity, but uh, I have concerns that other charities won't be able to get their aid in, as well as like a UN backed organization, right? So I've been donating to like
Mm.
UN organizations like World Food Program just because I'm thinking, well, how else? If I donate to Human Appeal or SKT Welfare or my Welfare Trust or whoever, it's like, well, I don't
Mm.
know. As much as I support those charities for other, you know. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
from that perspective, yeah, it's nice for. It sounds sad saying it, but it's nice that they feel like they're not alone. Um, this kind of coincided with the Madeleine ship that Greta Thunberg was on, like last week or
Yeah.
a few days ago. They got seized by Israel. Um,
Yeah.
in terms of practical goals, aims, and objectives, I don't know who the leader organizer is. I don't know if this is like a joint effort. I don't know what they are hoping to achieve. But it is it seems like quite a, what's the word they say? Oh, what's the term? Something nightmare, organizational nightmare, whatever. It just seems like really
Mm.
difficult to organize something like this, let alone to have a unified objective, crossing over how many other
Yeah.
countries. I've seen people in Tunis
Yeah.
that are part of the convoy dressed as Abu Ubaidah, for example, and
Mm.
seen people, families, seen youngsters, I've seen elderly people driving coaches and buses and stuff. And that signals to me there's a spectrum of thought there. There's people who want to go and deliver aid. There's people that want to go and uh, conduct some sort of symbolic protest or some sort of standing form of solidarity. And then there's going to be some who want more than that. Some who want to break through a border, some who want to actually uh, be some part of some form of resistance, either towards the border, like that's being managed by Egypt, partially at least, and beyond that into Gaza, right? So the spectrum there, I consider it quite difficult to manage. So I'm quite
Yeah.
surprised at how organized it is, but I suppose for now they're all heading in the same direction. So we'll have to wait and see what happens when they get there.
Yeah. We'll deal with it when they get there. Yeah. But I
Uh,
mean, you can't hope to get anything in without breaking through the border, can you? So
yeah, I don't. I
is that
mean,
not the assumed objective? I don't know.
I hope not. I hope not. Only because I don't see a practical uh, positive end goal for that. You know, that's either going to end up in bloodshed amongst us or bloodshed against the IDF, for example, without much you know uh, positive outcomes coming out of that, apart from more pressure on Israel, which already exists. You know. So
Hmm.
I don't know.
I'm just
You got to
bringing it up
you.
here. I just searched for the objectives of this convoy, and it says these are the goals. Although obviously you can look into the sources of this, but number
Yeah.
one, break the siege of Gaza by politically and symbolically challenging the Israeli blockade. Number
Mm.
two, deliver humanitarian aid. Number three, open a humanitarian corridor, aiming to establish a passage through Egypt into Gaza. And number four, raise international awareness and solidarity.
Yeah. So
So
the
these are
two
the apparently the objectives. Hmm.
the two key points there are the symbolic nature of it and the political kind of signaling that they're trying to get out. That's the most obvious one. What we have to kind of assume is that there is an element of like there's a psychology behind this where it's like nobody's doing anything, so I'm going to be the one to do it, and every one of those 10,000 people is thinking that of themselves. But what can end up happening is getting there and feeling deflated with yourself because actually there is already a blockade, and obviously there's already people on the border trying to get aid in. You know, it's not like you're not doing anything that others haven't tried to do in a sense. Rafah is full of trucks trying to get aid in that has been donated from across the world, and you are essentially gonna. I don't see you doing anything other than getting in line. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like there are bigger organizations with more power and more influence than the average Tunisian or average Algerian person that are trying to breach that. So what do you bring to the table beyond sheer numbers? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? You know,
Yeah,
when
yeah.
we talk about people of power
But
and influence,
I'm assuming, bro, that that is the whole point. The whole point is to do what others have not been willing to do, which is physically push through. I don't know, right? Otherwise, yeah, like I don't know what the objective would be. What's the?
yeah, I just see it as a bit of a risk of destabilizing whatever sort of organization is happening there. Because I'm not one of the people that thinks that
I
everybody
think
in
they want
Rafah
to
right now.
destabilize it.
Yeah, I'm saying not everybody. I don't think that everybody in Rafah right now, before this convoys, everybody in
Mm.
Rafah right now with aid, with trucks, who is sending the aid, who's paying for the aid, from politicians to charities to whoever, is trying to get that in, and they're meeting blocks, and they have done for so long. So these 10,000 new people, I'm trying to kind of conceptualize what they're bringing to the table beyond sheer numbers that might shift that. You know, are they going to say, "Oh, there's 10,000 new people now. Oh, we better open it"? I don't know. I don't think so. The other risk as well.
Yeah, I think it's got to be force or nothing.
Yeah, but we say force like it won't end in bloodshed. Like that's not what we should
I'm
be
sure the
hoping for.
people going are willing to die, right? Otherwise, why are they going?
So that's another thing. Like we're sitting here and like saying, "Oh yeah, they should go and die." Like we're supporting that notion.
I
I
didn't
don't
say
know
what
if
they
that's
should
helpful.
do, but I'm assuming if I was to
Yeah,
go,
yeah,
I would assume there's a good chance I'm gonna die or get
yeah.
injured for sure. Otherwise, I
Which is
wouldn't go
which
if I
goes
wasn't
back to
willing
what
to
I'm
do it.
saying. Like I feel like it's more for the people going than it is for the Gaza's benefit. It's for the people going to feel like I partook in something as some sort of effort, and then their reward is with Allah. Like at the end of the day, everybody on that convoy, their reward is with Allah, and the outcome is with Allah. I just,
Hmm.
there's two sides to this in the sense that there is the practical outcome, removing my emotions from it, removing the emotions of everyone involved, and what is the actual objective outcome of this. And then there's three actually, I suppose. There is the that objective outcome. There is the reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for people making any form of effort, trying to change something with their hand, a munkar physically. And there is the emotional sort of I don't want to say gratification, but yeah, that sense of fulfillment from both the people going and also the guys who see that symbolic kind of unity with the rest of the ummah. So it's just
Hmm.
interesting to see those spectrums because when you're embarking on something like this, you kind of got to analyze all three, um, and I think that's what we fall into a trap sometimes where we think that we are the ones that are going to make the difference. So let me go out there and do it, kind of oblivious to all the other game players that are out there that have been trying to do stuff, with more tools, a lot of them at their disposal than the average person with a coach or a Toyota pickup truck that's on this convoy. So it's just the
Yeah.
euphoria of watching that, and especially as a North African, a Tunisian, starting in Tunis or Algerians together, and my family looking at that and sending me clips, and it's like, oh, like look at us, and the pride that you feel as a North African. Oh, look at us, we're actually doing something. Look, we're doing more than anyone else. Like you can get sucked into that and the euphoria just to actually reach a point and get deflated. And I just kind of want to be objective about it, or maybe I'm, what's the word, like sucking the wind out of it, whatever they call it. But it's just you've just got to. It's deeper
I
than
think the
a
technical term is party pooper.
party. Well, it's not a party, bro. This is real. This is real lives. These are real lives at stake. When I was
Yeah.
seeing those convoys, and I don't know how many of them are children that are actually going all the way, but there were kids in the crowds, like waving at them and supporting them, and some might be partially joining them. Like if you were in Libya,
That
you
would
might
be
join
mad,
them.
bro.
Yeah, but
I
you
never even thought 1 second that anyone other than just young men or
no,
men
no,
in
no.
general would were going.
No, no, no. I doubt that. Come on, this is North Africans we're talking about. They'll see a convoy, they'll just follow it as long as they can. A lot of them may be following it just for the duration of their own country. For example, they cross into Libya.
Okay.
Lots of
Yeah,
Libyans
that's
follow
different.
as
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
I want to be there for the moment. I want to see that. I want to partake. Oh,
Yeah.
look, mum and dad, I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
there. That's a story to tell.
Yeah.
And there's going to be those
Yeah.
who continue on and actually join it. And you know what? Like any protest, I'm sure you've been to protests before. You get swept up in that euphoria. You feel like this is a moment in history that's being made, you know. But this isn't necessarily the first time civilians have tried to go across Rafah. I think there was the last one was from memory, maybe 2018 or something, and a lot of people got hurt and stuff. So I could be getting my years wrong, but there was something similar a few years ago. So yeah, I think because of the circumstances, the genocide that's unfolding, this coinciding with that, the whole over a year and a half or so of shed bloodshed we've seen, we're just grasping at any form of movement that may alleviate, that has even
Yeah.
a percentage of it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Um, I mean, yeah, it's just yeah, maybe they hope that there's something. I don't know, to be honest, how other people think. Someone like me, I like over calculate things. So before I was to ever join something like this, I would be like I would want to know like a percentage probability that would actually make a difference before I like put my neck on the line. But I would very much see this as either you're gonna look, bro. Like when I think of this, I just think they're not even entering Egypt. That's what I think. Or if they enter Egypt, they're not getting to Rafah. Like even if they got to like Sinai, which is the Sinai Peninsula, even if they got that far, like there's like all these gangs and stuff. They'll just like rob them in
The
Sinai and
best
stuff.
case,
Like
yeah.
it's a crazy journey, bro. It's a crazy
The,
journey. So
the,
I can't see how it's gonna be successful, but I rate them, bro, because in the end, yeah, they're doing something and they'll be rewarded by Allah for it,
yeah,
for their
exactly,
intention
exactly.
and their effort. Hey, bro, even without the obstacles of the different governments and police and army and whatever, and then potentially facing the Israelis on the other side, even without that, it's a long journey, bro. Like
Yeah,
just
of course, of
driving that
course.
is a long journey.
I mean,
So, and
uh,
these people, you would assume, they've given up like jobs or like income
yeah, I was
sources
thinking
to
that.
do this. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
that's a big sacrifice as well. So
I, the best case scenario for me, I mean, beyond achieving their goals, but in like an objective reality, the best case scenario would be that Egypt hosts them. In a sense that they let them in, but they let them into Rafah, but they wouldn't necessarily let them beyond that. Um, but hosts them there. Uh, Even if you want to use the term, co-opt that protest. Co-opt that kind of symbolic recognition. Like we saw that was that video I shared earlier in Mind Heist. There was I think it was like 9 weeks ago or whatever. There was a protest in
okay.
I can't remember where, a pro-Palestinian protest in Egypt, but like behind it, there's banners of Sisi and stuff. So in terms of minimizing bloodshed but maximizing that symbolic effort, that's probably what I'd think. If I was Sisi, that's what I would do. If I was in his shoes, that's probably what he'd end up happening. Is to like, oh
Mm.
yeah, come in and here you go, and here's free food, and here's free koshari, and rest up and have water. Like, رحب بيهم, but maybe nothing more beyond that that could destabilize whatever border control they have there. Because could you imagine the scenes? Could you imagine the scenes if it just went descended into chaos at the border? It would just be chaotic. I don't understand how you could have an organized effort that would bring any form of benefit in all of that chaos. That the IDF or
Well,
wherever wouldn't
depends
take advantage of.
if they can blow the whole thing open fully or not.
And then
Because
what?
yeah, Egypt's always been, especially since 67 and 73, etc. They're just very obsessive over nothing kind of changing in that zone, in that area. They've already kind of been invaded from that border before, and they lost lots of land. They were able to regain it afterwards, and they just want things to kind of stay still because they're
Mm.
worried about their kind of territory and they don't want to risk the territory. So that's their objective and their priority. And so something like this, like breaking the block on humanitarian aid getting in, breaking that, they would just see as a threat to that objective that they have. So
Well,
they
it's
wouldn't
within
want
their
to,
interests, regardless.
you know.
It's
That's what I'm saying.
with
Their interest is very nationalistic. Obviously, it's just purely about their territory and their people and
yeah,
this and
it's
that.
that's the thing. Like, you've got a balance between the willingness of people to sacrifice and to bring about a level of chaos upon themselves, which that's the reality, isn't it? And then the long term kind of, oh, how do we get back from this? How do we get back from this chaos that we've been tested with? Because there is no stability in chaos. You can't drag that back, and the only thing that ends up happening is more stable actors that are orbiting you capitalize on your chaos. You know,
Yeah,
for
but I think
example,
the people in
for
Gaza don't want stability,
no,
and
of
even
course,
Egyptians don't want stability,
what I'm
because
saying is,
when you're in a very bad situation, you don't want stability. You want
yeah.
change,
I'll give you
right?
an example. You know this example very well. Obviously, the what was it, the 6 Day War, or however many days it was. You know, what ended up happening was Israel capitalized on the chaos that ensued, and that was with armies, let alone with just people against each other. You know, that was actually more unified than this might be. If you ended up with a
Yeah.
situation with the population, the convoy, or whoever's on Rafah in conflict with the Egyptian army, aka Arabs versus Arabs, Muslims versus Muslims, whatever you want to call it, who capitalizes on that? Yeah, who comes in as a third party or fourth party or whoever many nations and capitalizes on that chaos? It's a balancing act. This is what I'm trying to say. So when you say,
It
"Oh, they
is,
don't
yeah.
want
I mean,
chaos,"
this is the bit where I can't speak further online about
no, of course,
this topic.
I know, I know.
I'm
You've got a
afraid.
very fi amrullah attitude towards it, which is fair play. That's a fair perspective to have. Like, as long as we're sincere, inshallah, whatever happens, they are
Yeah, but
domino effect
also
will
I'm
lead
saying that
towards that which is,
my life is comfortable, bro. So I want
of course,
stability.
yeah, of
But
course,
if my life was not comfortable, I wouldn't want
I
stability.
know,
And that's just talk about dunya. If you're
of
talking about
course.
the rights of Allah and how I should be behaving in order to please Allah, then maybe I do want a little bit of instability in my life in order to
Well,
change myself to improve myself, right? But then you could say, oh, but there's instability within yourself or your family or this. But I'm like, yes, but there's a overall bigger picture here where I can't
yeah.
just fear stability until I do nothing and die doing nothing.
Well, there's that element, but there's a big difference between, just vibes and planning and methodological
Well,
preparation,
100%. Well, 100%. Yeah.
and know the powers that you're going up against, and this is
Yes.
why,
Yeah, and
and
this
look,
is the problem. So then you get these more, what's the word? Haphazard
yeah,
organizations of people with less leadership, less hierarchy, less logistics, and all of that. They try and do it. Allah yajzihum khair. But yes, it
yeah.
won't be as effective that way, will it? For sure. And then it
Can I
might
ask you
it might
something?
have secondary consequences that are
I
not
want to ask you
favorable.
a thought experiment for you and everyone, and
Go on.
even for me. Do you think it's not. This is a stupid question. It's more of a rhetorical question. But do you think that everything that governments do, that everything that governments try to do? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Of course not.
Yeah. And the thing is, we don't often consider that the roadblocks that we face, they face, and we see a percentage of their public discourse or public news statements or whatever it might be. But in terms of actual efforts and things that are going behind the scenes, we see, you know, tiny, tiny amount of that. So we often say, "Oh, they're not doing anything," and then we can do more than they're doing. And then you go there and meet a barrier that's even harder than the barriers that they have to cross. And then you just question, like,
Yeah,
it's just that
because you
it's
have
just
less
that
means than them. Yeah.
yeah. And I only say that, you know what changed my perspective on that a lot, and it's nothing to do
Mm.
with Islam, actually, funnily enough, like deen or learning about the deen or whatever. It was my time in the police. It was my time as a police officer, and it gave me a perspective
Mm.
of authority that I hadn't considered because I'd never lived it. It's very easy to complain about a particular, social issue, or a criminal issue, or crime, or whatever it might be, and then actually be the one who's dealing with that crime and knowing the limitations and barriers you faced with. And actually, you as
Yeah.
a person or a team or an organization or a department, you really want to fix this thing. But there's all these roadblocks that you're trying to overcome. Meanwhile, you have those
Yeah.
who aren't within the know.
Constraints.
Yeah, those people that are outside of the organization. They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you're useless. You don't know what you're doing. We could, if I was in your job, I'd bet I'll do your job, mate." Blah 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 blah. And
Yeah.
all you can do, there's two options. You can either lash out on those people, and you'd be like,
Mhm.
the dictators that lash out on people, which we see across the world, or you could just patiently manage that person. One thing I used to do, for
Yeah.
example, in the police, I give you an example. We once arrested a teenage girl. I probably spoke about this before. An example like this: we arrested a teenage girl. Uh, there was a crowd that formed. Everybody was like, "Oh, how can you guys? Blah blah blah. There's so many of you, and there's this
Mhm.
and that, and blah blah. What's she done wrong? And leave her alone. Blah blah." And then
Yeah.
after everything calmed down, I actually went and spoke to everybody there, which no police officers usually do. But I just thought, I don't like that they don't know what's going on, and a lot of police officers just want to leave the scene and just get on.
Yeah.
But I hate that barrier that exists between
You're the
authority and the
PR
public.
guy.
Not even a PR. It's more about, I legitimately was frustrated because I knew all the facts and the public don't.
Well, that's what
And
PR is. Public relations.
relations, okay, but there's public relations. When you say public relations, there's a
You mean the connotation that comes with it?
yeah. The connotation is that, oh, we're just feeding them snake oil, you know.
Yeah.
But no, there's a legitimate facts and truths that need to be shared, so you get the whole picture. You've only got a puzzle piece,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I've got the whole picture. And that person
Yeah.
had a knife on them that they were holding for someone else, and they threatened another girl with it. So what
Yeah.
do you do? And they're like, oh God, I did a girl with a knife? No way, like that, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
look,
100%.
what I'm saying is, I'm a bit of an optimist, and I try and assume the best. And I believe that everyone in that region wants stability in Gaza and wants good for Palestine, even if it's not for the Palestinians and it's for themselves. Like you mentioned about Egypt, like they've got national interests and they want security. Well, those interests align because we want stability for Egypt as well. We want stability for Gaza. Nobody wants a war on their border because it's always going to pose a risk to spilling over to their side. Generally speaking, right? So I'm sure, you see all these people. Like, I know I've met people that work in the UN, for example. I've met people that work in international relations. We see people on all sorts. Like, look at Jalal bringing all sorts of people on the podcast, that, like Francesca Albanese, or all these people that work in these big organizations that actually have more sway and more power, where they're met and they bump into and butt heads with people with equally, or if not more, power and resistance in that manner as well. So there are barriers at all sides. There's people that say, why can't X person, X authority do this? Well, they've got an equally opposing force that is funded or whatever that does that as well. So it's just this notion of, look, we need to work together. That's what I'm saying. I think that's why I'm saying, like, when they go to Egypt, the best case scenario in my perspective is that Egypt welcomes them and engages with them and not shuts them down completely and doesn't let them in. But at the same time, I would be concerned uh, if they just said, "Hey, go. There's a door. Go and die." And then you've got that kind of chaos that ensues there. So Allah musta'an, may Allah guide us to what's best. Maybe I think too much about these
I
things
mean,
in a different way or a deeper way. But I don't like getting swept up in euphoria because I've seen the damage that can do. Uh,
yeah.
but that's just what we're faced with. Those are the cards we're dealt right now. Now, you talk about it as if, well, the only solution is that we can just have a clean slate. So we'll have to burn it all down, and we can only ever make change if we get rid of all this nationalism. But that's the only tools that we have at our disposal now, without further destabilizing ourselves, which leaves us open to more. You know,
I don't know
look,
what's
Joe
going to
Laney,
happen.
for
I
example.
just
I'll give
know
you an example.
generally
I'll give you an
what's right and
example.
wrong.
I'll give you really. You're a fan of. I say a fan, but I remember the episode we did in Syria about Syria, and you were as we all were, like very happy with the what was happening,
Optimistic.
etc., optimistic, etc. And then I did some, research and stuff, and it was interesting because I saw videos and clips of Ahmed al-Sharrah, the early videos, okay, before he stepped into the organization. Giving you an example of like the police, they step in like from an outside perspective, and he had these comments which were very, uh, what could I say, optimistic and black and white and clear cut, and the world was very black and white to a younger Ahmed al-Sharrah. And then he
Yeah.
got into power, and people will say,
Mm.
"Ooh, I don't like that, and I don't like this. Why is he saying that? And why is he doing this? And why is he making these changes? What's going on here? Or has he sold out, etc., etc." You know, um, but that isn't selling out to me. That's someone who's actually stepped in, seen many of the factors he was oblivious to before, and acting accordingly within the best interests of the people he's responsible for. For example,
Yeah.
Israel was yeah, and these are easy examples to answer, but we'll say them nonetheless. Israel was obviously bombing.
Mm.
Was it the south, I believe? And they were like, "Oh, that's it." People, commenters online, he should go and fight Israel right now. And obviously, the obvious
Yeah.
answer to that is, well, how? They're not ready yet. It's the same with Afghanistan. When Afghanistan got independent, for example, I say independence, but they kicked out America, etc.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's the same narrative. So what I'm saying is, stepping into those organizations, stepping into the full picture, you realize, oh, actually, I need to act a certain way and I need to play this smart,
Yeah.
right? But we
Yeah.
don't have the whole picture and we never will. So all I can say is we have to try and work with those people who have power, the people who have influence in all the levels they may be, beyond the average layman, beyond sheer numbers, and try and not hinder ourselves and try and put effort behind those things that will benefit. At this stage, yes, it feels like a deadlock, and every day we look at the news, we're like, oh, has nothing changed yet? Has nothing happened yet? People sitting in the UN or the rooms, all these rooms, and talking and talking and talking, whilst people are dying and getting massacred and getting killed, you know.
Yeah.
And you're just hoping and praying that there's some sort of breakthrough, and it's
Mm.
frustrating, and it's but at the same time, you think, well, does me going there and throwing myself at the situation without a plan or without any sort of influence whatsoever behind me, does that make things better or does that make things worse? Is there something going on that I'm slowing down or hindering by this is me asking myself the question. This isn't a comment on anyone else. If I was to join a convoy, if I was in Taunus right now, you know, could they have been on a cusp of some sort of breakthrough to stop this genocide? And now they have to pivot towards whatever's going on in the border. Look, I know it sounds like I'm making excuses and whatever, but I can't help but think that way. I honestly can't,
Yeah.
because that's what, from an organizational perspective, from someone who's been in some form of authority, it, I believe that there's good people. It might not be the government, the leaders of the government, but I believe there are good people with good intentions in these massive organizations. I don't believe that people in these
Yeah.
organizations that are trying to, let's say the people in the UN that represent Algeria or represent Tunis or represent whatever. I don't believe there's people, every single person that represents our countries that sits in those chairs, that speaks in those settings, are all completely fake and they all just speak for the sake of speaking. I don't
Me
believe that.
neither.
Do you understand? So I
Mm.
believe that every organization that has an Ahmed and a Muhammad and a Fatima and a Aisha, that even if they might not be the most practicing people visibly, or they might not have a beard, or they might not have hijab, I believe they want good for Palestine, and they believe that these outlets that they're trying to pursue are legitimate in their eyes, are the most they can put forward, in the world that we live in, with the nation borders, with the states, with international law, with all these things that we not necessarily agree with, but these are the cards we're dealt with right now. So we have to utilize the means available to us. So because of that, yes, you might look at Sisi, for example, in Egypt, and say, well, he's this and that, and he just wants his power and he wants his courtesy. I don't believe every single person in the Egyptian government, from the head of state to the border guard in Rafah and everyone in between there, I don't believe it's just full of sheep and yes men. I believe there are people that genuinely want good, and there are people that are genuinely trying to do something, and we might not see all of it, and we might be hindering it by thinking, oh, they can't do crap. I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the one that frees the Palestinians. You know,
Yeah.
this is my narrative.
I agree with you, bro. I
Yeah,
agree with you. Like, when you try and achieve any goal, as a Muslim, this is right.
yeah,
When you try and achieve any goal, part of achieving it is akhadh bil asbab, taking
mm,
the necessary actions. You don't just say that, well, if Allah wills it, then I'll do it. No, like if you look at the preparation of the Prophet ﷺ, whether it's for the hijrah or different battles or whatever, the preparation was always there, and the preparation was yani heavy. So 100%, you have to do what will reasonably bring out the result. But I guess also part of the outcome is the preparation in terms of your relationship with Allah, the dua, the tawakkul. This also plays a role, obviously, as well. But yeah,
mm,
you shouldn't do something unless you really believe that it would work.
mm.
So I guess these people think it might work, or maybe they think too far beyond that. I'm not sure. But yeah,
The, the,
100%. And I don't also agree with you that there are always people in these machines that
mm,
are not like, my main critique here was the ideology,
of course,
nationalism
yeah,
as an ideology. That is a one of the problems here. Not, and there are other ideologies involved here that cause the situation. But
yeah,
nationalism, for example, that's the problem. So if you really espouse the values of nationalism, then and then you act upon them, and you do nothing about trying to tweak it even, then you're
yeah.
part of the problem for sure. But
I think
if you're different, then you're different. What can I say?
I think I think I'm leaning towards the most likely outcome of this convoy as being something that will be partially co-opted, because they wouldn't have got as far as they have without doing some sort of like, this is our stated aims and objectives, and none of it involves destabilizing XYZ country. Do you understand what I mean? Like,
Mm,
a lot of people have to go through a visa process or getting these cars across. Like, I've been through a Diwana border station; it takes forever. So the
mm,
thought that 10,000 people got through between wherever, Algeria to Tunis, or Tunis to, without any hindrance. I mean, the only caveat to that is Libya. Maybe actually the the Tunisians and Algerians and the half of Libya are like, yep, you guys go over there, because they're not necessarily always in agreement with half of Libya and Egypt and the rest of the
obviously.
Khalij, and that's
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of where
yeah,
the
for
that it
sure.
splits. So it could be that, you know, if you want to be a
Yeah,
pessimist,
I
you could
think I
say
think
Tunisia and
for
Algeria
those
are
countries, I
winning.
don't mind.
Tunisia, Algeria, and Libya are winning a PR battle by saying, "Hey, yeah, sure, here you go, free drink and water, and off you go, pop. Yes, we love Palestine. Oh, it's a shame we're so far away, but there you go." And then they're kind of palming it off to the others to deal with, to give them a bad rep, because,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
or they've all in agreement that actually, yes, we're going to allow this to happen to. I'm speaking from a completely objective point of view and as a politician here, but to let off some steam, because that's kind of what it is for a politician that's trying to keep stability in their country. They'll, like Morocco, for example, during the Arab Spring, Morocco allowed protests to happen without
mm,
much pushback, because it was a letting off steam tactic, as opposed to other
mm,
responses which were clamped down completely, zero tolerance, which only
mm.
uh, you know put more pressure on the population, caused it to explode.
Yeah. Turned
But
into a
Morocco,
war, basically. Yeah.
yeah, Morocco would actually let them, do what they needed to
Mm,
do, and then at night, the bad actors, the ones that were really like causing a scene, like breaking stuff, whatever, they rounded them up at night in the cover of night when no one could
Oh,
see,
really?
whatever. And yeah, so it's
I didn't
like
know that.
there's different ways that you can deal with this as a
Mm.
authority. You know, the UK, for
Yeah.
example, biggest march ever against the war in Iraq. It was just a letting off steam exercise. When you organise a protest in the UK, you inform the police that you're organising a protest. There are no surprise protests,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We would get a call in, and we would, and I've been in these organisations. I've been in the police. We'd get a call. They'd say on such and such a date they're
Can you
organising this
order it on
protest.
like Uber Eats or something? One
Well,
protest,
sort
please.
of. They'll say that, and they'll say, "All right, can you provide us protection?" Because protesters always have counter protesters, so they need protection. You can't just let
All right.
no 50-year-old single mum waving a placard wants to get punched in the face by a EDL thug,
Mm.
or vice versa.
Yeah.
All right, so
That's good PR, bro. We're defending people's freedom of expression. Boom.
ah, this is it. So as far as like the narrative that you can't protest in the Arab countries or whatever, well, the protests in Western countries are all smoke and mirrors anyway. So
Yeah.
these are the dynamics that I like to get stuck into, because
Yeah.
there is so much more than just feeling good, seeing something and feeling good about it. Because honestly, when I've been to any pro-Palestinian protests, sure, I could say to myself, I haven't been to any recently, but back in 2014, I think I attended some. I said, sure, I could say that I've made a difference and I've raised awareness, but actually,
Mm.
if I was being truly honest with myself, I think I did it for myself, to feel less guilty about what's going on and to feel like I've done something, And my reward may be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but in the truth of it, a lot of people will go to a
Well,
protest
it
and then
doesn't
they'll go
sound like
home.
your intention was the right one.
No, I'm trying to be brutally honest with myself. The Sahaba would look at
Yeah.
themselves and ask whether they're hypocrites or not. And you can't
Yeah.
help but those thoughts coming into your head. Like, am I really doing this because I believe that I'm doing something? Or am I doing this
Mm.
just to make myself feel like I've got a chance Yom Al Qiyamah and say, oh, Allah, I did this at least, you know?
Yeah.
Even
Well,
though,
that's
like,
sincere. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and this is why, look, there are different sides of the fence with this convoy. I've spoke to people that are very upset about it and that, it's destabilizing our nations, etc., etc. And I've spoke to obviously people who are completely pro and think it's the next best thing that should ever happen, and I'm just trying to be real about it. And I believe my position is that, look, each and every one of those people, their reward is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah reward them for implementing, uh, an effort to change a munkar, بأيديهم, with their hands. And that's all I can say. And I just hope and pray that, uh, the best outcome is the one that is received and the one with least uh, blowback, essentially, at least damage upon ourselves. And if anything, it pushes more pressure on Israel, and it creates nothing changes without media attention. So maybe we'll get some media attention around it. I can imagine like a helicopter bird's eye view. Oh my God, look how many people are across Rafah. And like that's what they want. I know that's their objectives. One of their objectives was a symbolic sort of show of protest and trying to break the siege, etc. But
Mm.
Allahu alam, Allahu alam.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of you were saying Arab Spring and Morocco and stuff. I'm
Mm,
guessing in Morocco they were protesting, just stuff like probably joblessness and these kind of things, right?
yeah.
Economic opportunities. It's
Yes.
just, it's a pretty mad state of affairs in the world where when you as a man, you can't, apparently, you can't find a way to make a living, right? And so you go to the government and you ask them, like, where's my job? Find me a job, get me a job. And I'm
Mm,
not blaming them for that. I'm saying, damn, is this where we are, where the government is so involved in our life that when we can't feed ourselves, we go and complain to them? Like, wow, I think this is something that, we don't realize because we grew up in a world like this. And the last, 100 or so years, more than 100 years maybe, has been like this. But it's not normal, bro. It's not normal that the government plays such a big role in our lives that when we want
mm,
a job, we complain to them. When we want, I don't know, childcare, we go to them. When we want to defend our country, we go and complain to government like defend, like
It's
everything is like up to them. It's crazy. It's not normal. It's not normal.
it's it's the psychology, I think, of a highly educated population that refuses to settle for less. The reality is a lot of these youngsters are really well educated in these countries. The average 18-year-old in Tunisia or Algeria or whatever has studied far more than the average 18-year-old in the West, but the opportunities presented to them are far less. So even though there is work available, it's just not at the standard that they think they've studied for. So you will see your
Yeah,
average
but
kind of
why do they? But what makes them think that the government has got to do like is linked to
because
that?
that
It's because the
because
government controls the whole economy,
yeah,
right? They
yeah, and
control the policies, but that
they'll
didn't exist before. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah, of course, of course. It's just there's so many facets to it. It just reminds me, like I've seen some videos in Zaire of like the average deli worker, for example, that makes Grand Theatre sandwiches. He might have like some really high engineering or chemistry degree or something, but this is what he could find. And alhamdulillah, rizq min and Allah. Um, but a lot of people don't have that. I remind you time and time again of the conversation we keep having when I go to Tunisia of people refusing to work in the fields, even though there's plenty of field work available. Youngsters, yani. So it's always left to the elderly
Mm.
women to go and work those field jobs because it's heshuma for a guy to work in the fields or whatever. And that's something that could easily be broken. So they'd rather go and spend their mother's money in the cafe than actually work and do that job themselves. And it's like another psychology element. And I think I'm a privileged person and I can speak like that and I'm aware of my privilege. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily know how much opportunity there is available that is being withheld by governments or expected for the government to provide. But if there's no investment, then there's no investment. So what can you do? Where do the opportunities present themselves? I don't know.
Well, this is where smart people they hold power without getting into politics or governance. So no one can
Mm,
blame them for stuff, right? Because
mm,
they're supposedly not pulling any strings, they're not influencing anything, they're not making decisions. So no one complains to them. Whereas they could be very influential, right? So
yeah.
yeah, it's just a crazy state of affairs, Yanni. That there's a central government and there's all these nation states, and that central government has control over what gets through these borders, and the borders are so like tightly controlled, and like this was not the case for most of humanity's history.
Mm,
But that's what you get, I suppose, if you want to. Obviously, some people think, okay, this is the world now. This is what we live in, so we're going to operate within that paradigm, of course. But as a, for example, yeah, would you be better off as a central government for a whole nation, or just like a mayor for a city, or a king over a city? What's it called? What do they call it? A city state, right? City state. My little city state. I tax the people. I'm the boss in town here. But other than this little city state, the rest of that land in between city states is like open, Yani. Yeah, you would. No one would come complain to you for jobs because you're not really involved too much in so much of their lives.
but you say that, but it's not that you're
Mm.
saying it as if like people go and protest about the direct correlation. It's you are making it so there's no jobs. What they're actually complaining about is like, oh, it's corruption, and you're stealing all the money, and because you're stealing all the money, this domino effect. Like, even if they can't manifest it,
Well, that's another factor. Yeah.
yeah, but if they can't, let's say, for example, there was no evidence of such things, they would still default to there being evidence of such things because that's the human condition. Human nature is to offset any blame onto someone else. So they'll say, well, you're a
Mm,
crap president, and that's because you're a crap president, there's no jobs. Or you're a crap mayor, or, I've seen it here in this
mm,
town, just about basic things. I go on the local paper all the time on the internet and I see the comments, and like any issue,
mm,
anything that goes on, they
mm,
blame the local council. They blame local authority. They're incompetent. They're useless. They're this and that. Right?
mm.
It's just there is no self accountability. You know. I give you an
Yes.
example. East London. East London. East London is some
Tremendous
areas of East
place.
London are
Mm,
so like the litter, for example. There's a litter problem. There's like in Birmingham, for example,
mm,
there's a litter problem in some areas, and it's like you speak to people, they're like, "Oh, the council, isn't it? It's the council." Oh, the council crap. The council incompetent. You're throwing the litter in the street. Like
Mm.
the council are coming and throwing the litter in the street, and then
Yeah.
not cleaning it up. You're throwing the litter in the street. But there's that accountability issue. Every individual person has
Yeah.
or it's like let's go even bigger. Global warming, whether you believe it or not. The pollution. We're not recycling. You're the one not recycling. Not that not that it
Mm.
flipping whether it's true or not. But like microplastics in the ocean.
Mm.
Well, why is that bottle in the ocean? It's not the government that threw it there, although sometimes it is. Have you ever seen any documentaries about waste disposal and how they ship off their waste to other countries to meet their
Yes.
yeah? So there is okay, maybe that was my example, but you know what I
Mhm.
mean. You know what I'm trying to say. There's always going to be
Wait,
that
I know
offset.
that they ship it off to like China, but I didn't think China throws it in the sea. I thought they like recycle it or something.
Was there? I can't remember what the country was. Could have been Sri Lanka or something. But there was a country where like Europe was sending all of its plastic waste and it was just like
Okay.
used as a landfill. They run out of landfill space, so they will send their landfill waste to other
Oh,
countries' landfills and
right. Outsourcing. It's all the
outsourcing.
rage.
Yeah.
Maybe AI can
Globalization,
like make
maybe.
a landfill.
I think we should send it off to
AI
space.
generated landfill.
Elon Musk, instead of going to
Yeah.
Mars, he should make like rockets that just send plastic out into the stratosphere. We've got so much space up there.
Yeah, you could compact it down, right? So you can fit tons and just make some sort of like, so you don't even have to use jet fuel, catapult it. So you just have
Plastic
this
power.
thing constantly catapulting. Boom,
That's it.
boom, one after
That's
the
it.
other.
And
That's the aliens' problem, bro, not our
even if it
problem.
tried to fall back in, let's say it didn't shoot it far enough and it got caught in the gravitational pull, it would just burn up on re-entry. Problem solved.
Okay,
Nice.
guys, this is the Soumoud Convoy. This is the anti-Soumoud Convoy episode.
No, it's not. I've tried to be as
Yeah,
diplomatic as
bro.
possible.
Yes, you're Mr. Stability, bro.
You know why,
Um,
bro?
yeah, but
It's just
anyway, Allah yajzihum khair. Either way, with or without this, with or without the convoy, may Allah open up the border, allow humanitarian aid in, and more,
Amen.
and more, and more,
Amen.
and solve this whole situation. And the main thing, Yani, give the people in Gaza thabat because they're in a bad
Amen.
situation. They're in obviously a huge test, but if they can pass that test, then there's no more than Jannah for them, which is
Yeah.
a worthy reward. So,
Yeah, definitely.
we're also being tested by that as well. So, and may Allah forgive us for our shortcomings.
Amen.
And
Amen.
with that, we'll have to wrap up. But let us know what you guys think, inshallah.
Inshallah, bro.
Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdi, shadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. By the time we publish this, like maybe we'll
I was
publish it
gonna
on
say.
like next Monday. Maybe who knows where they'll be by then. Maybe we should try and publish it earlier than that.
If we can publish, yeah,
Yeah.
because otherwise the outcome is already gonna happen, and we're gonna be like
Yeah,
Internet
yeah, yeah.
Explorer.
Are we gonna look dumb, bro? Okay, yalla, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Like, said,